everybody, my name is Eric Hopkins and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're finding me for the very first time or you are a returning viewer and have not yet done so, please click that like and subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you get all the notifications about when I put up new content right here on this channel. So it's Thursday, so you know what that means, and it's time for yet another AEW weekly recap. This week is just Dynamite, but starting next week, we're going to have AEW Dynamite and AEW Rampage reviews here for you on the channel every Thursday. That way we get the entire week recap all in one show. So let's get into this week's Dynamite episode from August 11, 2021. The show is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania tonight, the home of Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. All right, so let's get going here. The show opened up with a memorial graphic for the late Bobby Eaton. Very classy on AEW's part. Obviously the late great Bobby Eaton, rest in peace. You'll always be with us for sure. MJF, flanked by Wardlow, cut a promo on Chris Jericho. He said Jericho worked as hard as he had, only to be stopped an arm's length away from the finish line by Wardlow. If somehow Jericho vanquishes Wardlow, he went through it all to find out MJF's still better than him, and he knows it. Wardlow said he'd beat Jericho anyway, and MJF challenged him. He turned around and he's like, "Oh, you mean like you beat Cody Rhodes in the cage? Get the job done." And then he walked off, and that's when Wardlow had an apple that MJF had been eating in his hand, and Wardlow crushed it. So it sounds like we're teasing at least a little bit of dissension here between Wardlow and MJF. I do think eventually it is going to be before too much longer going to be time for Wardlow to break away from from MJF, I should say. And this could be the planting of that subtle seed for that storyline down the road. Obviously, right now the Pinnacle still is in full force against the Inner Circle a bit here at times. It kind of feels like the faction feud is kind of taking a step back a little bit between the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle. But by the end of the show, we got a little bit more of that after seems like a little bit of a break during all these labors of Jericho here. Of course, Jericho and MJF have been going at it, but the factions themselves have kind of taken a little bit of a back seat to this storyline between the two leaders here for sure, which is fine. They kind of, got to the point where they needed to kind of back off a little bit on it and kind of push some other feuds, and I'm glad that they did that so that this feud didn't get stale. So it'll be good to see, Sammy Guevara and Shawn Spears next week, so that'll kind of further it a little bit longer as well. So we'll see what they do, but I like this promo here. Like I said, it just planted those little seeds of doubt that possibly maybe not all things are copacetic in the Pinnacle faction here for sure. So we'll see if that leads somewhere. If Wardlow eventually is going to turn on MJF, no doubt about that, because MJF's not going to go babyface. I don't think MJF could work as a babyface. Maybe he could if done right, but I think it's money to keep him as a heel. So Wardlow eventually could be that big guy who splinters away, kind of much like what they did with Brian Cage and Team Taz. So I think that could be very good at some point moving forward. It was announced that rather unceremoniously that Christian Cage would be facing Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship at All Out. Yeah, they kind of mentioned this on commentary as the Elite made their way to the ring for this next upcoming match, the opening match of the show. So yeah, it was kind of odd that they just kind of mentioned it in passing, and then of course it's mentioned again for the live crowd at the end of this match. Yeah, I mean, it didn't quite go over with the crowd when it was announced at the end of the match as well, I'm sure, as they hoped it would. But it's because they've been building this Adam Hangman Page thing for a long time, and many fans want to see that at All Out. But again, it sounds like AEW has this plan for CM Punk and most likely Bryan Danielson, the former Daniel Bryan from WWE, to probably be at All Out in Chicago. So if that's the case, I'm sure the reason why AEW is doing this is so they don't take away Adam Hangman Page's thunder when he wins the AEW World Championship sometime soon here in the future. So this is a chance to put in Christian Cage, who they build from the get-go as this major signing, which a lot of people were let down by that announcement as well. So they're at least following through with that by giving him some wins and having him earn the #1 contendership. So I think it'll be a good match. Christian's no slouch. I mean, he's had some great matches in WWE. I remember he had a great rivalry with Randy Orton, and those matches were absolutely great. Granted, that's been some years ago now, but I think Kenny Omega and Christian can put on a good match. So I think I understand fans' disappointment right now with the Adam Hangman Page stuff not being pulled, the trigger not being pulled on him right now. But I think it's for good reason, because I'm sure AEW wants to give Adam Hangman Page the full treatment when he gets that title, and they don't want to take away from his moment. And I think if that's the case, that's actually good to push it back a little bit longer, maybe at Full Gear later this year or or maybe they wait till next year. I don't know. But Adam Hangman Page is going to get the belt, and I still believe he's going to be the one to beat Kenny Omega for that title, but we'll just have to wait and see when it is that they do that. The opening match was the Elite Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, versus Matt Sydal, Mike Sydal, and Dante Martin. This was a outstanding six-man match, and I'll tell you what, the kid who stole this show was Dante Martin. This kid came out tonight and was just like, you know what, by hook or by crook, I'm getting over with this crowd, and he was going absolutely insane. He was on fire in this match. The Sydals established control against Matt Jackson early. Nick tagged in, but was taken down with a drop kick from Martin, who also sent Matt Jackson packing with Tajiras, I think that's how you pronounce that. Omega cut off Martin's offense, but was sent to the floor by the Sydals. Martin hit a wacky assisted dive on the Elite on the floor, following by a diving crossbody on Matt Jackson for 2. Omega swatted away a dropkick from Mike and cut him off with an assist from the Bucks. The Elite beat him down with repeated tags. An assisted Kotaro Crusher got 2 count. Matt Sydal finally got the hot tag and ran wild on everyone, with a Northern Lights bomb getting a 2 count on Matt Jackson. The Sydals applied a Cobra Clutch Muda Lock combination, but Omega broke it up with Snapdragon suplexes. Martin came in with some innovative offense before finally tagging back in and hitting 10 punches in the corner. He landed a tope suicida on Omega, followed by a diving hurricanrana, and then he jumped back in the ring with a double springboard moonsault that got a good near fall on Matt Jackson. This was a great hot tag by Dante Martin. He was just going bananas, flipping and jumping and all over the place. Yeah, a lot of people complain about the spot fest and stuff that AEW does, but this kid was smooth. He was hitting every move that he was trying to perform, and he was hitting them all fluidly, and it was just going off without a hitch. And this crowd got completely on fire for this. It's the first time in a long time I've seen a full crowd at a full arena go absolutely berserk for a match. And say what you want about AEW, you don't necessarily have to like some of the things that they do, but for this crowd, I mean, granted, it was the opener of the show, and the crowd did come down a little bit in spots, but they were still a pretty hot crowd for the most part all night long. But for this match, they were absolutely on fire, and it was great to see from a fan's perspective. We got a parade of big moves concluded with an Omega V-trigger. Away Shadow followed. Some of these moves are like very hard to pronounce, but forgive me. Then a second V-trigger followed as well. Martin fought out of the one-winged angel, which was also great because he went to kind of dump him and he kind of flipped over onto his feet, which is something you don't normally see out of the one-winged angel. He was met with another V-trigger for his efforts, though. Martin rolled up Omega repeatedly, but was cut off with yet another V-trigger before the one-winged angel, followed by the BTE trigger, where all 3 guys need him in the face. Ended up finishing the match. So Martin did get pinned here, but again, it's one of those things, in my opinion, in pro wrestling, you can pin guys and still get them over. This kid, I mean, I've not seen a kid get this kind of a reaction in a long time. So this kid made his name in one night. He took the loss, but it was against the world champion and the world tag team champions in AEW. So again, nothing wrong with that booking. I think it's actually a good way to build a new star too, and hopefully this kid gets some more opportunities because, man, he was on fire, man. I can't put it into words. You just have to see this. It's absolutely incredible. After the match, Don Callis was about to cut a promo in the ring with the Elite, but was interrupted by Christian Cage on the ramp. Callis called him a Stamford Stooge, a reference to his days in WWE, obviously. Callis pointed out the numbers advantage, leading to Jurassic Express coming out for backup ahead of the commercial break. Once back from the break, Callis tried to put over Christian, who was very loudly booed. Callis was booed for trying to do that. And he got loud CM Punk chants during this. This was so loud that Callis was having a hard time trying to stay focused on what he was trying to do. He kept like repeating the same line, and there's a lot of yes chants in this as well. So obviously the crowd knows or are definitely anticipating CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. And I know CM Punk did an interview for his upcoming appearance on the Stars TV series Heels, which is based on pro wrestling, starring Stephen Amell, who was on Arrow, by the way. And CM Punk in this interview was talking about how, he's basically flat out denying, on August 20th, it sounds like we're going to be doing a screening for the TV show in Chicago and things like that. I don't, when AEW mentions the best in the world, they could be talking about anybody, all this sort of stuff, very much downplaying the fact that he's heavily rumored to be at the company. But of course, what's CM Punk going to say? He's not going to come out and tell you, yeah, I'm debuting August 20th on AEW. They want this to be a surprise. They want this to those of us who don't follow or any wrestling news website online, they want this to be a surprise for the audience if they can actually pull that off. Everybody in the building, for the most part, in this crowd especially, knows what's going on with Punk, knows what's going on with Daniel Bryan. But I'll tell you right now, if AEW does not pull the trigger on CM Punk especially, this Chicago crowd, on August 20th or on September 5th at All Out, they're going to riot if he's not at either one of these shows. If he's not at the Rampage show August 20th, I'd understand a little more. Maybe they're saving him for the pay-per-view. But even if he's not there, after the way AEW has teased this, it's going to be bad news. So they better, have him ready to go. Otherwise, and in this interview, he looked in great shape. So I think he's coming, no doubt about it. But again, you've got to pay this off. Otherwise, you shouldn't be teasing stuff like this as a pro wrestling company. But I have faith. I'm sure that they're going to pay this off. Callis asked Christian if he was nervous. Christian said, "Are you finished, you carny piece of shit?" I like the delivery here from Christian Cage, absolutely. Then revised it to Jagoff for some Pittsburgh slang. He announced that this Friday, Omega would defend the Impact Championship against Christian for the debut episode of Rampage. Said he had a conversation with Tony Khan, who made that match official. I'm not totally sure how I feel about this. I like the fact that it's for the Impact title. A lot of people have been criticizing, and I believe even Brandon's mentioned on this channel, how he's wondered what exactly is Impact getting out of this deal between AEW and Impact kind of, go. Obviously, Impact is, or AEW is getting their name out there a little bit more with this because, Kenny Omega's carrying their world championship and things like that right now. But what exactly is Impact getting from it? Well, in this case, I like the idea that the Impact World Championship, and tonight on Dynamite we had an Impact Tag Team Title Championship match. I like the fact that the Impact World Championship is being defended on an AEW program, so it gets their name out there. So at least it seems like at this point they're doing that to kind of get Impact over a bit, to kind of maybe draw viewers onto their Thursday show, which makes a lot of sense because AEW has shows on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now Friday. So with Impact being there on Thursday, and I can't remember exactly when NWA is on. I think it used to be Tuesdays, but it makes some sense to try to get these other companies' names out there and merging these brands together and trying to work with each other. So I like that they're doing that. But when it comes to the fact that Christian Cage will be challenging for the Impact World title, and he's also going to be challenging for the AEW World title in a few weeks at All Out, I don't know if I like the idea of them facing before All Out in this Impact Championship match here. Now, this could end up being some sort of major swerve where maybe Christian beats Kenny Omega. I don't know if I like that idea. You know me, if you've watched any of my reviews here on the channel, I'm not a big fan of pinning your world champion unless it's in a title match. Now, in this case, this is an Impact title match. So if he were to lose the Impact title to Christian Cage, cool. Christian Cage is a former TNA Impact wrestler champion of his own right. So it would make some sense, I suppose, if Christian's willing to work the Impact shows as well. And he's an Impact alum, so it kind of makes some sense. But if he pins Kenny Omega, it's going to kind of make Omega look, not as strong going into All Out. And if Christian pins Omega for the Impact title, maybe he decides he doesn't want to challenge for the AEW title, and maybe somebody like Adam Page comes back in the picture. I don't know. I don't know exactly where they're going with this. I'm intrigued by it, but they just got to be very careful with how they do this. Otherwise, you're going to start to get some criticisms, especially if you start pinning Omega. Again, granted, it's a different title, that sort of thing. Maybe you can rationalize it that way, but it's kind of walking that line of you don't want to pin your AEW World Champion when his title is not on the line, too. But I got a feeling this is probably going to end up in some sort of screwy finish to where, Christian doesn't win the Impact title, and it will lead to the All-Out match, most likely is what's going to happen. But it's interesting to see that they're doing this. I like how they're giving it some clout, like I said, on their debut episode of Rampage, so that'll be good. But Rampage, they've got that thing stacked with 3 title matches, so that's going to be a good show, hopefully, to kick off that new show for sure, and maybe we'll get Punk the following week. But yeah, I'm just a little nervous about it. We'll see what they do, though, going forward. Before the segment ended, Jungle Boy also revealed that Jurassic Express would challenge the Young Bucks for at next week's Dynamite for the AEW World Tag Team titles. They mentioned during this promo that the Jurassic Express is now the #1 contenders based on the rankings. So perfectly fine with that. I wouldn't mind, Jungle Express winning those belts at some point. And because it feels like the Elite, they could start to maybe drop some of those belts at some point here. They've had them for a long time, and I think it's going to start happening sooner rather than later. The Young Bucks, you would think maybe that they would drop it at All Out instead. But maybe they want to do, the Jurassic Express win the titles here, and maybe they do the rematch or something at, All Out, even though I know AEW doesn't always do rematches, which is a good thing, to be honest. But we'll just have to see what they do. But, yeah, I'd love to see Jurassic Express kind of get more of a push here. I want to see him do more with Luchasaurus. I want to see him do more with Jungle Boy and all that stuff. So I think that could be a good thing. So we'll see what happens. Jungle Boy's on fire right now, too. He along with all the younger talent like Darby Allin on the show, got the biggest pops when it come to the crowd reaction. Britt Baker, obviously, for sure. So everybody wants to talk about AEW signing all these guys, this, that, and whatever, about how it's going to take away from the younger talent. Apparently not, because they were the most over wrestlers on this show. So it just all depends on how you book them. You don't bring in old guys to go to the forefront for title matches. Now, granted, Christian's in a title match, but again, at least in this case with Christian, he earned it over the last few months. He's won matches. He's not lost since he's been in AEW. So by building him up, it makes more sense. They're not just bringing him off the street and saying, all right, title match. You didn't earn a thing. So it makes more sense to me to do it that way. But it's if you bring in some of these other guys, especially legends and stuff, you use them the right way, it can be used effectively. And of course, signing all these guys, yes, there's going to be multiple storylines going on at once, but it doesn't take away from the main guys you're trying to push, and those are the young talents. AEW is doing a good job with that. Like them or not, they are doing a good job. All right. Let's move on here. We had a Malachi Black video promo which aired. Black addressed Cody saying that they were both lonely. He produced Cody's boot and said Cody had one foot in the grave, and he said he'd be willing to put the other one in it. He ended by referencing God. So I like this promo. Again, it's kind of one of those things. They had Malachi Black win convincingly against Cody, and then they followed it up, but again, they didn't push him too much. They didn't overexpose him. They just had a short promo segment, and they moved on. So again, it's good to where you don't have the guy on every single week, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know crowds like to see the guys that they want to see, and they want to see the same guys when they go to the shows, and they feel like they're promised that nowadays, because in a lot of other companies you get to see every single wrestler every single time on each show. So like if let's say, for example, John Cena don't show up, the crowd's disappointed. But here's the thing. It overexposes talent sometimes when you do that. I like the fact that we don't see the same people every single week in AEW. It gives me a chance to want to see them. So when I do see them, I'm like, all right, I get to see him again. It's the whole motto of less is more sometimes, and I like how they do that. Speaking of which, Amiro video promo aired. He will face Fuego del Sol on Rampage this week, and if Del Sol wins, he earns an AEW contract. First of all, like I just said, Miro's not being overexposed here. He's been doing these promos, which is great, because he was talking about how, again, he always mentions Lana / CJ Perry, his wife, in his promos when he's talking about God and stuff. And he's like, he all he asks is to be able to please his wife over and over and over again. So I love how he interjects that. She, in my mind, is clearly coming to AEW at some point. They'd be crazy not to do it at this point. It's just whenever her no compete clause is up at WWE. So she's definitely going to be coming in here. I think it's going to be great. In regards to Fuego del Sol, I'm sorry, buddy, doesn't seem like you're going to get that AEW contract to me. I know he's been on Dark and stuff like that, but the thing AEW does a lot of times, people want to say, oh, they got this guy, they got that guy, they got all this. But you got to understand, a lot of times these guys that AEW uses is not always signed by the company. They're kind of independent, and they're kind of on the shows, but they are not actually AEW contracted to the show. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, Fuego del Sol's been killing it over there on Dark and Dark Elevation, so he definitely deserves a contract at some point, but it sounds like this is not going to be the place to do it. This could be one of those things, maybe he has a good showing against Miro. Miro puts him over a little bit, kind of like he did Lee Johnson last week, but Fuego del Sol's going to get beat here, and perhaps maybe he has such a good showing, maybe Tony Khan's like, all right, you impressed me. Here's your contract anyway. But Miro's not losing that TNT title anytime soon, so I expect Miro to eventually win that match on the debut of Rampage for sure. Before the next match, an inset promo aired for Daniel Garcia, who they're now calling Danny Garcia for sure, who said he would have won last week had Moxley and Kingston not interfered. 2.0, the former Ever-Rise from NXT, said Sting better not get involved. So kind of just setting up the next match, which was Darby Allin versus Daniel Garcia. Neither man could establish an advantage early on as they performed a technical chain wrestling match. The first real action came when Garcia kicked Allin out of a rope break. Allin went for a Fujiwara armbar, but Garcia quickly reached the ropes. A distraction from 2.0 allowed Garcia to take control with a hard whip into the corner. Back from commercial, Garcia was targeting Allen's left arm. Allen avoided a corner attack, but a 2.0 distraction allowed Garcia to knock Allen off the top rope. A hammerlock back suplex from Garcia got a 2 count. Garcia applied a grounded leg Nelson, but Allen's foot reached the ropes. A chop from Garcia fired Allen up, who laid in slaps. Allen countered a suplex into a coffin drop attempt, but Garcia caught it and applied a rear naked choke. That was a great counter, so I liked that. It was kind of more of a springboard, off the middle rope. It wasn't actually a coffin drop off the top, but yeah, he caught it, and for that, Allen jackknifed out of the hold and hit a stunner, then landed the coffin drop for the 1-2-3 pinfall here. Again, Danny Garcia takes a loss, but he had a relatively good showing against Darby Allin. Up to this point in the show, I thought everything was smooth in all the matches so far. Darby Allin, it felt like this match took a couple minutes to maybe get going a little bit, but again, Darby Allin's over with the crowd, and there's nothing wrong with that, and apparently they set up a tag team match next week between 2.0 and Darby Allin and Sting, and apparently a tornado tag rules or whatever they called it. So Sting's going to be in a tag match on Dynamite next week, I believe is when it was supposed to be airing. So yeah, Sting's going to get back in the ring, and after the match, obviously, Sting and Darby Allin kind of went after 2.0, who tried to get at Darby, and Sting broke it up and things like that. So, and Sting laid one of them out on the ramp on the way out. So yeah, so they're definitely setting up that tag match for next week. Death Triangle were backstage. Rey Fenix tried to fire Pac up, but Penta said he wanted Andrade first. Pac told them not to worry and told them to focus on the tag titles. Pac then addressed Andrade and said they have no idea why he's obsessed with the Death Triangle. If Andrade still has a problem, Pac's ready to fight anytime, anywhere. This is going to be a great match at All Out. They announced that this match is going to be, or Pac and Andrade will be at All Out on September 5th in Chicago. This match is going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be great. Both talents are absolutely incredible. I can't wait for this. It's going to be a barn burner in my opinion. Matt Hardy and Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn, they were versus Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, and Wheeler Yuta here with Chris Statlander at ringside. Cassidy did his shtick early on, but was met by repeated deletes from Hardy. So, Orange Cassidy tried to stick his hands in his pockets. When he got down to about here, Hardy would go delete, and he'd knock his hands out of the way so he couldn't put them in his pocket. Yeah, he rolled Hardy up, but Hardy immediately hit the side effect for 2. Hardy went for a dive, but Cassidy rolled out of the way and hit a lazy splash. Like he's just kind of on the middle rope, and he just kind of fell over under the guy, so I thought that was kind of funny. Cassidy fought off both members of Private Party before assisting Yuta, who hit a modified angle slam for 2, which was interesting because I kind of thought, at some point maybe here or on Rampage, maybe we get a one-off appearance from Kurt Angle since they're in Pittsburgh, but not to be tonight. Never know about Friday, though, but it's only a 1-hour show. Maybe they won't do that, but we'll see. Private Party hit the silly string on Cassidy ahead of the break. Once back, Yuta fought off a double team from Private Party. Multiple distractions led to Nyla Rose running out and leveling Chris Statlander on the outside ahead of their match later on tonight. So again, just kind of furthering that a little bit, but nothing too spectacular when it comes to that. Jack Evans attacked Cassidy on the outside. Yuta finally reached Taylor for the hot tag, who ran wild before taking out Blade and Angelico with a dive. Taylor powerbombed Mark Quinn onto Cassidy before hitting a spinning Liger bomb on Quinn for a 2 count. Cassidy hit the Tornado DDT on Hardy, followed by a tope. Taylor tagged in Yuta, who hit a top rope splash for 2. Cassidy got a blind tag and hit a Swanton bomb for 2. Private Party hit Gin and Juice on Yuta, but Cassidy broke up the pin and hit the Orange Punch on Isaiah Cassidy. I was getting confused with Orange Cassidy and Isaiah Cassidy. Sorry about that. Hardy tagged in and hit the Twist of Fate on Yuta for the win. So Matt Hardy gets the win here. Yuta takes the pinfall. he's been having a good showing as of late too on Dynamite and Dark and all this stuff. Wheeler Yuta for sure, and he's got a great future. And I guess reports were coming out how WWE declined to sign Wheeler Yuta at one point, so I can't understand that. The kid's got a lot of talent, but he doesn't fit WWE's mold, that's for sure. But Hardy got got the win here for sure. So it's kind of furthering the feud between the two factions. Great. It was more of a. It was a solid match. I wouldn't say it was a great match. It was good, but it was just kind of, I don't know. There's nothing to write home about when it comes to storyline wise. But yeah, I thought everybody did their jobs well. It was kind of a numbers game situation here, in my opinion. The Hardy office had more guys out there than the Best Friends did, so it was just kind of like, okay, eventually the numbers caught up to the baby faces, and that's just kind of how it went for sure. But I mean, it was okay. It was a good Dynamite match for sure. Andrade El Idolo and Chavo were backstage with Dasha. They called Pac ungrateful. Chavo suggested that Andrade teach Pac who the boss was at All Out. So that was the confirmation, and there we go. We're going to have this great one-on-one match, which is going to be good, like I said. A Santana and Ortiz promo aired. They said FTR, quote, went home too early at the first sign of danger, which doesn't make much sense in kayfabe, though. Their rematch will happen. This promo was showing the injury that Cash Wheeler had when he got his arm caught on the ring apparatus, or that kind of holds the turnbuckle onto the ring post, and they showed it, and they literally showed his skin being pulled when it got caught, and that looked absolutely painful. And of course they showed the blood pouring out, things like that. It looked like it hurt like the dickens, man. But I'm glad that Cash Wheeler seems to be okay. He's obviously taken a few weeks off from this, and they're kind of building to this. This could be a match we get it all out, but you know how AEW does sometimes they throw big matches on Dynamite or Rampage, so we're going to see where this happens. I still think the winner of this should probably get, and this could be interesting too, because if FTR were to win this feud, perhaps maybe Jungle Express does win the AEW tag titles off the Young Bucks, and we get that feud, babyface versus heel. If the Young Bucks retain against the Jurassic Express, perhaps Santana and Ortiz get the tag title match, and it's babyface versus heel. Now, you don't have to do babyface versus heel all the time. You could do two babyface teams or something like that. So never say never, but it could be interesting, maybe a little telling, depending on how these finishes go, exactly what their plans are. We'll have to wait and see. But I think all four of these teams are kind of in that discussion for the AEW World Tag Team titles right now, and I can't wait to see who comes out of this on top for sure. Speaking of the AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks I'm sorry, I skipped a part here. Chris Statlander was up next, and she defeated Nyla Rose with Vicky Guerrero on the outside. Nyla Rose attacked before the bell. Statlander briefly gained control before being taken out with a pounce. Rose hit a German suplex, but Statlander avoided the follow-up and hit a pendulum moonsault off the apron. Cassidy and Vicky Guerrero faced off at ringside, and Vicky proceeded to let loose a very loud, ear-splitting scream, one of the loudest screams I've ever heard Vicky Guerrero do in my life. I can only imagine what Orange was thinking when he was about a foot away from her, and she was just screaming at the top of her lungs. It was definitely cringe for sure. Rose used the distraction to hit a chokeslam for 2. Statlander handstanded off the ropes to avoid the leg drop that Nyla Rose usually jumps off the top to do, and when she was standing on her hands, Rose wasn't having any of this and took her out with a spear while, Chris Statlander was upside down, which I thought was absolutely pretty insane. I mean, that looked like it sucked for Chris Statlander, no doubt about it. But the Tripper, though, I thought it was a great spot, no doubt about it. Chris Statlander fought out of a corner attack and hit a powerbomb when Nyla Rose was on top of her, and followed by the Area 451 splash for the win in about 4 minutes. Chris Statlander, to me, I know she's got a reputation on some of the, AEW hating, Twitter feeds and stuff out there of being a botch queen. Well, here's the thing. She has greatly improved over the last year or so. Ever since she came back from her injury, she's been much better in the ring, in my opinion. And they're clearly realizing that, I think, and they're definitely setting her up to eventually probably challenge AEW Women's Champion Britt Baker, most likely. Because I don't think Britt Baker is going to lose the title to Red Velvet on the debut of Rampage for sure. That's just a way to get Britt Baker on the show, defending her title in front of her home crowd for sure. I think Chris Statlander is probably going to be at the upper echelon of title contenders for the women's division here. So I think that's going to be a good match whenever they do that. Nobody's perfect. I mean, like I said, Chris Statler's improved, but I just get irritated sometimes when I see all these things like AEW botches and things like that. Because look, I understand botches happen. Some people feel like AEW have botches all the time. Really, though, when I'm watching these shows, they happen occasionally, but they don't happen like every match. So I don't understand why some websites and things like that just want to hate. Because, I mean, I could pull up a WWE botches, Twitter feed as well. I mean, every company has botches. And to be honest, I watch all these shows. And WWE a lot of times seems like they have more botches than AEW has at this point. That's just my opinion. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. And I'm not trying to be like an AEW homer. I'm just trying to be fair across the board. That's one thing I do with the wrestling reviews on this channel. I want to be fair. If AEW does something stupid, I'm going to call it out. If WWE does something stupid, I'm going to call it out in my opinion. But that's just it. It's my opinion. Some people may love it. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Lily stuff and the doll with Alexa Bliss on Raw. I think it's stupid, but somebody probably somewhere likes it. So I try to give people that benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, I just don't understand the whole idea of hating on a company just because you don't like them. I'm not a big fan of everything WWE does lately, but I've been a fan of WWE for 30 years. So I'm going to always be honest with you guys with my reviews. So if I feel like somebody's doing something good, I'm going to say they're doing something good. If I feel like they're doing something bad, I'm going to say that too. And in this case, I think in Chris Statlander's case, she's improved, in my opinion. If you're just looking at it totally objectively here. I know all entertainment is objective and is subjective for that matter. And this is entertainment. Pro wrestling and sports entertainment, while they kind of have their differences, at the same time, they are all a form of entertainment. This is an art, and some people view art differently, and that's perfectly fine. But I just think that as fans, we need to be fair as well and just back off on the, choose a side sort of thing. AEW, WWE, you have to choose. No, you can like both. And if you like both, that's great. If you don't, I'm just going to be honest the way I feel about everything I'm watching. So sorry for the tirade, but anyway, that's just kind of how I feel on the whole thing. After this match, we had the Young Bucks backstage with Brandon Cutler. They said that next week would be easy as a layup. They were playing basketball, as they were saying. It's obviously still kind of playing off that whole gimmick they did a few weeks ago, coming out like the Space Jam gimmick, the Elite Squad, that sort of thing. But the Jurassic Express showed up and ran a basketball play around them to get the advantage. They stole the ball, went for a play, did a little bit of blocking and things like that. And then Luchasaurus stood over one of the Bucks and said, "Not my house." It was a goofy segment, not necessarily needed, in my opinion. But they wanted to do it. So, I mean, yeah, this is probably the most unnecessary thing to build up to this match. We already knew the match was happening. You didn't necessarily have to do it. But, I mean, it got a chuckle out of me, I suppose. But at the same time, sometimes the comedy stuff that wrestling does is not always the greatest. You could do it in a way like I felt like the stuff on NXT with Gargano and the Dexter Lumis first date stuff was funny, or the Cameron Grimes and LA Knight stuff has been funny. This was kind of, it was just there, whatever. It wasn't bad per se. It wasn't the most hilarious thing in the world either, but anyhow. A Britt Baker versus Red Velvet video package aired. Velvet said she wasn't happy that Baker was on top. When she started in AEW, nobody knew who she was. Baker said she'd defend on her turf. So, yeah, well, that match is happening. And speaking of Britt Baker, she was brought out to a sea of terrible towels because they are in Pittsburgh, and Steeler fans are crazy in this city for sure. I believe the towels probably had some sort of Britt Baker thing on them, so it was an AEW towel, but they were playing off the whole Steelers terrible towel thing, I think. Britt Baker's parents were shown in the crowd. Tony Schiavone asked Baker about Red Velvet. Baker said she couldn't comment on Velvet's rise to the top because she couldn't relate. She's always been on the top of the division, and she stepped up when Pittsburgh needed a champion. Granted, she's kind of playing the character here. She's not always been on top in AEW, but she has risen to the top for sure. But of course, she's supposed to be a heel, I guess. She's getting more babyface cheers than anything nowadays, especially in her hometown here in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I mean, she's obviously acting like, got that ego about her. I'm the top of the division. I've always been the top, that sort of thing. So great, good promo here for sure by Britt Baker. She's greatly improved. That it doesn't hurt when you're dating, Adam Cole, baby, in real life. So yeah, I mean, obviously, he's gotten her under his wing a little bit. He's one of the best promos in the business. People who call him a vanilla midget, I don't understand that. He's one of the greatest wrestlers in the world today. And hopefully, in my opinion, I think I'd love to see him in AEW if his contract expires like it's supposed to at the end of August. We'll see what he does. He may re-up with WWE, or we could see him here with the Elite. And, of course, his missus here, Dr. Britt Baker. Baker said that Velvet may have some hope if they were wrestling in any other city but Pittsburgh, but this Friday, Britt Baker versus Red Velvet will be the main event of the show for the women's title. And still, your AEW Women's Champion, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, as the crowd chanted along with that. That's when Red Velvet ran out and attacked Baker, leading to officials breaking it up. This was the part of it I was kind of like, I don't know if you needed to add Red Velvet here, because she got in the ring, scuffled with her a little bit. It was a pull apart. Baker held the title up, teasing the match. Nothing wrong with it per se, but I just kind of felt like maybe you didn't need to go that extra mile. You had the video package with Red Velvet earlier in the night. You didn't necessarily, especially in front of this home crowd, you didn't necessarily have to have her tackle Britt Baker in Pittsburgh, but Baker's going to go over strong here on Friday, so it's in the long run, it probably doesn't really matter. But part of me was just kind of like, didn't know if you needed to do that, but that's just me. A Brian Cage and Ricky Starks dueling promo aired. They'll face off next week. Part of me is like, all right, let's kind of move on from this feud. Brian Cage is split from Team Taz. Obviously, they're still trying to finish that whole thing, that whole kerfuffle they've had in Team Taz for sure. I believe even Ricky Starks beat him. Yeah, he beat him for the FTR title, or FTW title. So they'll face off furthering that feud. So hopefully it'll be good. Again, it's not a feud I'm necessarily, super excited about personally. But I get why they're continuing it to kind of finish off that whole storyline. But at some point we need to move on here, I think. Impact Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore joined commentary. Notably, the only Dark Order member that came out for their entrance was Colt Cabana. So that was interesting. So we had the Impact Tag Team Championship match here. The Good Brothers, Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows, defeated Dark Order, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson with Colt Cabana at ringside. This was a pretty good match, I thought. It wasn't, again, it's kind of, it wasn't by any means a bad match for sure. It was just kind of, there. It wasn't like, obviously everything after that opening 6-man was going to kind of come down a little. None of this is bad. I think all of it is solid pro wrestling. No doubt about it. I'm not knocking the matches at all, the last few for sure. But it just kind of felt like, all right, it was a good title match. Okay finish, I suppose. Dark Order went for a fatality, but Gallows cut it off. Grayson fought out of the Magic Killer and hit an assisted tope on Gallows before Uno hit a flatliner on Anderson. They went for the fatality, but a belt distraction when Gallows tried to throw one of the Impact titles into the ring allowed Anderson to hit the gun stun, or basically an RKO or a diamond cutter, followed by the Magic Killer to win and retain. So I wouldn't call it a distraction finish. It was a guy who was in the match, kind of threw the belt in there, so to speak. It caused the ref to kind of go, knock the belt out of the ring, but it's not as egregious as some distraction finishes we've seen. So I thought this was just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So they, good title defense here for the Good Brothers, and it got the Impact World title on AEW to get the Impact, name out there, and hopefully people will tune into Impact now. A lot of people don't seem to be watching Impact or things like that. AEW and WWE are the two big dogs in the world of pro wrestling / sports entertainment at this point. So it was at least good to see the Impact World titles here on the show for sure. Camille, the NWA Women's World Championship match against Layla Hirsch, had a video promo here to promote that match. Camille said that Hirsch was no match for her. If you saw them stand side by side in the ring last week, you could tell there's a huge size disadvantage for Layla Hirsch here. But Layla Hirsch is a spitfire, man. So she's not going to go away without a fight. So it'll be interesting to see that match. I believe it's for the NWA Empower pay-per-view they've got coming up. So that match could be good. We'll have to wait and see. QT Marshall and the Factory were in the ring with Tony Schiavone. Nick Comoroto brought Schiavone's son. Okay, before we get into this, though, Tony Schiavone, for the last few weeks or so, a few weeks back, got like a protein shake poured on him, and he's been getting bullied by QT Marshall and things like that, or Marshall, whatever you want to call him here. And Marshall's been teasing backstage that he's been, going to be apologizing to Tony Schiavone. And of course, weeks and weeks have gone by and that hasn't happened. So Tony Schiavone, has him out here and apparently for the apology. But QT Marshall said he wasn't going to apologize. He was going to give Tony a chance to apologize for the way they've treated him, or he's treated them. So I don't know what he did to really deserve that. But anyhow, apparently, the Factory has an issue with Schiavone. So Nick Comoroto, outside on the ring, brought in Tony Schiavone's son, who was at ringside, and apparently he wants to be a pro wrestler. He looks like he's got, the physicality to do so, and he looks like he's a young, guy. So maybe he'll be joining the company at some point, or getting some tryout matches on Dark or something like that. So nothing wrong with that either. He pulled him out of the ring, or out to the ring, and That's when QT Marshall gut punched him, and he was demanding an apology from Shivani. Shivani apologized reluctantly. He's like, "Is that good enough for you, you son of a bitch?" That sort of thing. But Marshall hit the diamond cutter on his son anyway and laid him out. That's when the music of No More BS, Paul White, no longer the Big Show, his music played and he came out to the ring. Aaron Solo was thrown to Paul White by QT Marshall as Marshall and Camarado fled the scene, and White hit Solo with a big choke slam, knocked him down, and of course staring Marshall down the entire time to end the segment. So it appears one of the reasons I heard that the Big Show / Paul White left WWE was because he wanted to have at least another match. He wanted to wrestle a little more. And same with Mark Henry. I've heard Mark Henry eventually wants to have a few more matches in their career, and WWE wasn't willing to do that. So here we are with it's not going to be again, it's not like they're bringing in an old talent to main event for the world title. Big Show is going to do this, feud with QT Marshall, and it's going to be there. I understand some people may not be super thrilled with it, but it's nice to see Paul White, absolutely. But yeah, it's kind of, I get the criticism though. You bring in a guy like Paul White. Some people are like, why are you bringing in the old guys? Push the young talent. QT Marshall though, I mean, his whole deal is about pushing the young talent. And who knows? Maybe this leads to Big Show, getting over Nick Camarado or Anthony Ogogo if he ever comes back. Maybe he needs to change the name. Or Camarado in that regard. I mean, both names are a little wonky. But again, maybe this is about getting Tony Schiavone's son over a little bit. I mean, we don't know exactly where they're going with this yet. They could still have plans to get some of these young guys over by using the Big Show properly. Or, I'm sorry, Paul White. I shouldn't be calling him Big Show no more. No more BS. But yeah, we'll see what they do. I have faith. So far, they've not really, screwed the pooch when it comes to having, older talent come into the company and, use them in the wrong way. They've used them to, advance the younger talent. And if they continue to do that, I got no problem with this. So, but yeah, it was just kind of there. It wasn't anything, special for sure. They reviewed the lineup for Rampage this Friday. Impact World Championship, Kenny Omega will defend his title against Christian Cage. TNT Champion, Miro defends his title against Fuego del Sol. If he wins, he gets an AEW contract. AEW Women's Championship, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD versus Red Velvet. So again, 3 title matches. Way to kick off your first 1-hour show. This probably will take up the majority of the hour, I'd say. But they've already said that Rampage will be a sister show to Dynamite, much like Smackdown is to Raw, so it will be just as relevant. So 3 hours of AEW each week, that means something. Dark is just, it's kind of there, and Dark Elevation is to build up new talent and get them some wins. A lot of them are, squash matches, or you kind of know the winners going in and things like that. Nothing wrong with that. That, to me, I wish there was more of that in wrestling, because that's a way to properly build people instead of having them go up against, established talent and then no one gets over sort of thing all the time. You just got to book it properly, but I like how they do that. So at least in this case, I'm glad to see Rampage getting a full lineup for their debut, as they should. They need to get their name out there for that opening show. Lineup for AEW Dynamite next week. AEW Tag Team Championships. Young Bucks will defend their titles against Jurassic Express. Shawn Spears versus Sammy Guevara, who also has a major announcement. That'll be interesting to see what that is. So Sammy Guevara versus his old rival Shawn Spears here. Darby Allin and Sting versus 2.0 in a Texas Tornado match. So yeah, so again, good lineup. I'm glad that the one thing I love about AEW is they definitely show, tell you what they're going to be doing in the next week or two, month or whatever it is, whatever their plans are. They don't wait till the day of and be like, oh yeah, by the way, rematch. Now granted, Shawn Spears and Sammy Guevara is a rematch. That's for sure. But it's been a few weeks since they've done it. It's not like they did it last Dynamite, the Dynamite before that, and it's now like 3 weeks in a row. They've spaced it out, so it's like, all right, we haven't seen it in a bit. We've seen it, but at the same time, it's been a little time, so they're at least, sparsing it out a bit here for sure. And depending on what the announcement is, and of course, they're still doing the Pinnacle Inner Circle stuff, it makes some sense narratively to do it, not just to do it because we got no better ideas for sure. An AEW Dark Elevation recap aired with Joey Janela turning on his tag team partner Sonny Kiss. They showed Joey Janela pile driving Sonny Kiss on the outside before their tag team match. So yeah, I don't know exactly where they're going with this, but it was nice to see AEW show a recap of something that happened on Dark or Dark Elevation to kind of show us, hey, if something big happened that we may need to know, they showed it to us. So there's most of the time they just show that little ticker at the bottom of the screen that shows who won and who lost, which is good. Again, and a lot of times that's all that's really necessary. But if something relevant to storylines happen, I want them to show this kind of a replay, and I'm glad that they did that here. So we'll see where they go with Joey Janela, the bad boy, for sure. Then we had the main event of the show, Chris Jericho versus Wardlow in the fourth Labor of Jericho. If he wins this match, he gets MJF at some point here. Jericho went right after Wardlow. And here's the thing, too. Jericho took some criticism last week, I think. Again, the Juventud Guerrera match and Chris Jericho didn't start off very well. And the match itself was a little off. I talked about this last week on my Dynamite review. The Juventud Guerrera and Chris Jericho are both older wrestlers at this point. I think that's what a lot of it was. They had a hard time getting on the same page. A lot of it was a little clunky. Some of it was kind of botchy to some of the detractors' credit here. But by the end of the match, I thought it got over, and the finish was great with that flying off the top rope Judas effect. I thought that was spectacular. That was well executed. And the story is what sold the match, really. It wasn't so much about the execution of the match itself. But there were some criticisms that, Jericho looked tired. And I know Brian Alvarez on, Wrestling Observer, his review with Vinny on the Brian and Vinny show, I think, talked about how he thought the story was kind of like, well, Jericho is tired. And it took, and there's some criticisms out there like you're tired a week later. I mean, but the story they're telling, and this may be a bit of a, kind of an audible, so to speak, based on the performance that maybe some of the criticisms it got, that perhaps, the story is after all these labors of Jericho's had to go week in, week out, facing all these, obstacles that MJF has been putting in front of him. It's taken a tear or a toll on his body, and he's starting to, succumb a little bit to all of this stuff. So it's setting up the fact that he's going to be a beat up man going into his match against MJF, whenever that might be, most likely at All Out. So it makes some narrative sense to tell that story. Now, again, I think a lot of it was last week with Juventud and Chris was the fact that it's two older wrestlers trying to put on a great match with like a lot of high-flying stuff and stuff to try to tell the narrative, and they're just not as agile, and they're getting older. They're just not what they once were as a professional wrestler. But I mean, Jericho for the most part is still pretty good. But again, he's been wrestling week in, week out, and a lot of times Jericho has weeks off. The argument that he's tired the very next week, he's had a week to rest. I get it. It sounds ridiculous, but I think what Alvarez was trying to say was that it's just the story they're telling where it's starting to take its toll on Chris Jericho as they go along here. And I like the story because it should. Because when MJF gets Jericho, MJF is most likely going to dominate the majority of this match because, Jericho's going to be so beaten up after all these trials and tribulations he's had to go through to get to MJF. It makes some sense. And, of course, by the end of the show, we find a little bit more. But I just wanted to address that a little bit because I felt like, some of the criticism that Jericho gets sometimes is a little unwarranted. But I think he's coming toward the end of his career. And of course, he's going to be doing commentary on Rampage for the debut for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a commentator once his career is over. And it's clearly coming to an end sooner rather than later. But I mean, it's just something you got to expect when you got an older talent. Plus, Juventud Guerrera, who, I've not seen in years. He probably wrestled somewhere at some point. But both guys, a little bit clunky, understandably. So the criticisms are warranted. I think that's just where Alvarez was trying to go with that for sure. Jericho went right after Wardlow to start this match, but was immediately overpowered and beaten down in the corner. Jericho got a surprise flurry with a diving axe handle and a code breaker, but Wardlow kicked out at one. Wardlow hit repeated suplexes before moving to the floor and sending Jericho into the barricade. He drove Jericho repeatedly into the ring post. Back in the ring, Wardlow hit a powerbomb and then a second ahead of the break. More power bombs during the break and upon the return. So Jericho was getting powerbomb after powerbomb after powerbomb. So again, they were playing on the story that he's just getting destroyed. And of course, he's laying in the ring just, he got nothing left. He's like a boxer who's in like round, 10 or something. He's just been getting beaten on and beaten on and beaten on. So I like that story element of it. And I think it makes narrative sense that, MJF wants to weaken this man. If he has to wrestle him, he MJF being the sadistic heel, doesn't want to actually face Jericho. He wants to face him at, his advantage, and things like that. So it makes some narrative sense. I got no problem with that. Jericho tried to fight back with chops, but Wardlow caught a crossbody and hit the F10. Jericho took this F10. I'm sitting there going, man, this poor guy just getting beaten and bruised all these weeks, and now he takes an F10. MJF instructed Wardlow to finish him, but Jericho caught Wardlow's draping knee lift and applied the walls. MJF raked Jericho's eyes, forcing a break. Good little spot there, I thought. And MJF entered the ring to probably, I think he was trying to give the diamond ring or the ring to Wardlow to use. But referee Aubrey Edwards caught him and ejected him from ringside, which is interesting because I didn't know she could do that with this stipulation because MJF said that he would be at ringside, which they finally clarified. Last week they didn't really do a very good job, in my opinion, of letting us know what was going to happen because I think it was JR or somebody on the commentary said he would be the special guest ring or special referee for this match. I want to say MJF even said that, but then they clarified later he was going to be at ringside. Because obviously, if he was the special guest referee, there's no way MJF was going to allow Jericho to win. So I didn't know she was able to throw him out and eject him here, but she did. He kind of just went to the top of the ramp. He really didn't leave the ringside area. But Jericho produced Floyd the Bat while he was laying there, and the ref was distracted by ejecting Jericho and hit Wardlow with it and followed up with a Judas effect for the win here. I've criticized WWE about baby faces using heel tactics. I don't know if I would consider this necessarily a heel tactic. I'm not making excuses. You can maybe view it as it is. But Jericho was, I feel like, a desperate man at the end of his rope here after all of these brutal beatdowns that he's been getting over these years or over these few weeks here. And he turned to the bat when the referee was, distracted to give him the advantage because he was getting destroyed in this match. It was pretty much Wardlow, just completely brutalizing him this entire time. So it made some narrative sense to do it. Again, you can argue about whether it's heel tactics, babyfaces using it, and things like that. But I thought, at least in the story they're telling, with the fact that Jericho is, a desperate man here to get out of these labors, it made some sense. So I'm not going to hurt it too much here. That's when, let's see, after the match, Shawn Spears attacked Chris Jericho after the match, but Sammy Guevara made the save, setting up that match for next week as well. And of course, Sammy Guevara will come out here to save his buddy in the inner circle. Wardlow beat down Guevara, and MJF locked on the Salt of the Earth on Jericho, which Jericho tapped out here. That's another thing. Now, Jericho's not a champion, so it's not as big of a problem, but again, and here's the thing, though. It's, again, I'm trying not to make excuses for AEW because we talk here on this show about how WWE, or at least in my opinion, Finn Balor looked weak this last week when Roman Reigns had him tap out twice, I believe. We've had Bianca Belair being tapped out to Sasha Banks twice the last few weeks as well. I don't like your challengers for big matches, especially title matches, looking weak by tapping out in non-match situations for sure. This isn't a title match between Jericho and MJF, but it is a big match situation. But at the same time, like I've been mentioning here, the story they're telling is Jericho is just being brutalized. And of course, he had the arm injury when he fell off the cage at their version of War Games. I can't remember what they call it, Blood and Guts. So they've been selling the arm injury for Jericho for a long time. So MJF's move is the Salt of the Earth, which is an arm bar. And so because Jericho's punishment he's been taking, he does tap out here because he's been getting just decimated. So again, it makes some narrative sense to do it. I just kind of feel like maybe you don't want guys you're trying to have in big matches looking weak. But somebody's got to look weak, I guess, in this feud a little bit. But yeah, there's a part of me that's just kind of like, if I'm going to criticize WWE for it, I got to criticize AEW for it too. Yeah, so anyway, Jericho or MJF has having Jericho tap out here. That's when Jake Hager ran out and sent the Pinnacles members packing, and they ran up the ramp. And MJF grabbed a microphone and said their match would be next week. So I guess the fifth Labor of Jericho is going to be on Dynamite, I guess. That's what this says here. But I thought maybe they'd hold off to All Out, and they still very well may. Maybe there's like a screwy finish or who knows whatnot. But MJF said the stipulation is that Jericho cannot use the Judas effect, spinning elbow on MJF, and if he does, MJF automatically gets the win. And MJF even went a little bit further and said he must come out with no entrance music, so no Judas playing in the arena, so the crowd can't cheer. That was more of I think, to kind of get at the crowd. But I'll tell you right now, Jericho's going to come out to this crowd, wherever it may be next week. And this crowd, if they can get in sync with each other, they're going to sing Judas anyway. I got this feeling in my bones that they're not going to let that happen. So that would be great if the crowd could get that on their own. But that's going to be a hard thing to start a song. But if they can get in sync together, that could be a great moment, seeing them sing the song without any music playing in the arena. But it's just mind games to Jericho for sure here, trying to get under his skin. So next week, Jericho will meet not just his match, but his successor in MJF, as he says, as the show goes off the air. So all in all, I mean, I like where they're going with the MJF Jericho stuff. I'm interested to see where this is. To me, obviously, I feel like MJF goes over here, but they're building this up in such a way where you want to see Jericho finally get the win here, because obviously he's the babyface who's had to go through all this turmoil. So to finally get his hands on MJF, but MJF is probably going to dominate most of the match for sure, because Jericho's just, he's wore out at this point. Old wrestler, plus just putting him through what they've put him through. So I'm interested to see what they do with it. If they're doing this next week, what are they going to do it all out? That's interesting to me. They got to start filling this all out card a little more. They put in a few matches with Pac and Andrade and Christian and Omega, assuming that goes off, like I said earlier, after the Impact Championship on Rampage. But they've got some stuff going. They've still got a few weeks here before All Out, but All Out is mostly going to be sold on probably CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. They may be surprises, but we'll see what they do. You would think maybe you'd want to advertise a little bit too. I'm not sure, but CM Punk for sure. I think you keep that under wraps, but maybe Daniel Bryan. I don't know. I'm interested to see how they bring in Bryan Danielson, and we'll see what they do. But all in all, I thought this was a pretty solid Dynamite. The great opener. The 6-man tag was absolutely incredible with the Elite and the Seidel's and Dante Martin. Definitely go out of your way to check that out for sure. A lot of good, I think, storytelling and narrative building going into the pay-per-view, so I think they're doing a pretty good job of booking stuff. Obviously no wrestling show is perfect, clearly, for sure, but I personally enjoyed this and I had a good time watching it. But the real question here is, guys, what do you guys think about this week's AEW Dynamite from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? The show a few days before Rampage this week, so make sure you check that out. Comment down below, let me know, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you get all the notifications about when I put up new content right here on this channel. And until my next video, guys, take care.
Yeah, ready to go, man, lock and load. That's right, I swear to God that I can jump and roll. Yeah, I got a shot and I ain't stopping, no. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable.